our What Works speaker series. My name is Madeline Schultz, and I'm a part of the alumni team here at SAIT, and I'm thrilled that you have joined us to take part in this conversation about EDI at SAIT and what it means to our alumni community in their work and their lives. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their home on the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. The What Works speaker series was developed in response to feedback we received from you, our alumni. The focus of this series is on career development and how SAIT can be a lifelong partner in both your education and career. This evening, we are focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion at SAIT. With the launch of the EDI Strategy at SAIT, we wanted to share it with the alumni community and also invite members of the alumni family to share their experiences and work that they're doing as it relates to EDI. To those who submitted questions in advance of this event, thank you. I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A area, so I encourage you to post throughout the conversation. Our goal is to create a safe space for alumni, as well as the staff, students, and guests who have joined us today to ask questions and have a thoughtful conversation about EDI. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers for this evening. My colleague, John Partington, is the Associate Director of EDI here at SAIT and will be moderating the conversation this evening. John holds a Master of Arts from McMaster University and a Bachelor of Arts from Bishop University and has spent the last 8 years in post-secondary administration. Shahzia Noorally is a senior HR professional based here in Calgary on a personal mission to change the HR industry, challenging the norms around how great culture should be built and infused to make high-performing, engaging, and authentic, diverse workplaces. She holds a business administration diploma from SAIT, a Bachelor of Management degree from the University of Lethbridge, as well as a Master's of Education degree from the University of British Columbia. And Matt Janz. Matt grew up skateboarding in South Calgary and graduated from SAIT's Journalism Arts program in 2012. His own experience with vision loss makes him uniquely qualified to teach low vision and blind youth how to safely approach and enjoy skateboarding. He runs a low vision skateboard club called Skate Bats and is now working with his students on an ongoing skate park accessibility project called Alt Route. Now I'd like to ask John to tell us a little bit about EDI at SAIT and how the new strategy came to be. John.
Here we go. I've worked at SAIT for 6 years in total. And the last year and 3 months has been taken on in my new role as Associate Director for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. This is a new role at SAIT. I am the first person to originate it. And the main mandate and purpose of the role is to make SAIT a more inclusive place to work and study. Now, of course, I am only one person and I cannot do that on my own. So it's definitely about empowering others and finding ways to do this institutionally across the campus, regardless of unit or department. This is a plan that is for staff and for students. So I began this role last November, and the first thing I started doing was consultation. I hosted more than 100 different consultation sessions with internal and external stakeholders, just to hear what people think, where they're at, what their experiences were, and what they might want to see. So after doing those consultations and looking at all the evidence I could get my hands on in the form of surveys, complaints, best practices, other plans from different institutions, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Council, which I chair, was the group tasked with creating this plan. So we created it within a year. It launched this past November. So now we're in the implementation phase, which is of course the hardest piece to actually do the things you say you want to do. That's really when the rubber hits the road. So the expected outcome for the plan overall is to create what I call a healthy campus. That is to say, we have a campus culture where everyone feels welcome, respected, and that they belong, and that they're empowered to succeed. Now, the plan pays a specific focus on equity-seeking groups. Equity-seeking groups are different communities that experience barriers to participation on the SAIT campus. These include, but are not limited to, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ2+ folks, women in trades and technology or in non-traditional fields, English as a second language learners, but it's also people with disabilities and people from different faith backgrounds. Now, the way the plan will go about its work, there are 6 different goals that are listed in there, and each one of these things rolls up into our expected outcome. It's everything from making sure we have training opportunities for staff and students to shift their mindset, but it's also about making sure our rich diversity is represented in all aspects of the campus, and a variety of different things in between. So this important session really starts to make connections between what we're doing at SAIT and then also what's happening in industry. I can tell you all of the major corporations in this city are doing EDI work. If they haven't been doing it yet, they're certainly starting now. And I know Shahzia and Matt will have some more things to say about that. So enough about me. Let me turn it over to Shahzia. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, John and Madeline. I appreciate the opportunity to be amongst this great group today and to be able to be talking about all of these things because it's very near and dear to my heart. I'm also, as Madeline mentioned, a SAIT alumni, and I had a really great experience going to SAIT to do my business admin diploma before I transferred over to U of L to finish my degree, and actually started my co-op internship sort of life at SAIT, working in the procurement department of all places, which is nowhere near what I do today, but it was an incredible experience to be able to engage in that. And now, as Madeline mentioned, I'm a senior HR professional here in Calgary, and born and raised Calgarian as well. I skipped away to Vancouver for a number of years to do grad school and to start off my HR career path out there. Moved back to Calgary about 6 years ago and immediately started working for HB Financial for the last number of years, and recently left last May. One of those crazy people that decided to pick up and quit a job in the middle of this global pandemic and live to talk about it. And now I work for Fortis Alberta as an HR business partner. And I took on the opportunity very intentionally because I desired to sort of get some real foundational HR knowledge working in a very heavily unionized environment. And the experience has been challenging from a learning perspective, but also just from the whole experience of doing it all virtually as well. And when I'm not working, I also have a podcast that I run called The Color Gap, and it is focused on the experiences of women of color navigating through corporate environments, but recently kind of taken a bit of a pivot to focus more on career development and career strategy for women of color. It is very deep in my heart to be of service in a really meaningful way and to utilize my myriad of experiences and mistakes that I've made in my own career and on the pathways that I've taken to find meaningful work and give back to other, like you said, equity seeking groups in a really meaningful capacity. So that's kind of my holistic background and who I am professionally.
Great, thanks, Shahzia. Yeah, we really want to dig into your podcast in the Q&A, so more to come for that. So Matt, please tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John and Madeline and SAIT, and I'm super happy to be here. So a little bit about me. I guess I should just start by saying that I'm a low vision skateboarder here in Calgary, or a legally blind skateboarder here in Calgary, due to a hereditary condition called retinitis pigmentosa. So that just means I have a little bit of central vision and a little bit of side peripheral vision, but other than that, nothing else. But the other thing that as I mentioned, I'm still quite an aggressive skateboarder, just because of doing it by feel and all the support that I've had from my community here in Calgary. So been able to do a bunch of stuff, start a few programs like Skatebats, which is a low vision skateboard club for the legally blind kids here in Calgary. And I've also run programs in Sylvan and Red Deer and Edmonton, with requests to go elsewhere like Toronto and Vancouver. So there's lots of growth that seems to be possible. And then also, like Madeline mentioned, I started with my students a program called Alt Route, which is like this grant money magnet for skate park accessibility here in Calgary. So lots of big stuff going down this past year, 2020, and a ton of momentum heading into 2021 in terms of how we create space for movement and joy for kids, not just with vision loss, but all different disability groups and stuff. So yeah.
Excellent. That's great, Matt. I mean, good to hear that demand is growing for the stuff you're doing. And I mean, now more than ever, we need time outside and fresh air, especially from home. So all the more important, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. All right, everyone. So the majority of our time today is the panelist Q&A session. That's the most important piece. So we will work through the questions you've submitted. If any new ones have come up, Madeline will monitor the chat in your hands. So make sure that you put them in there and she'll toss them over to us. So before we jump into the questions in particular, let's define some terms for today. We really want to ground our conversation in exactly what we mean by equity, diversity, and inclusion. These things are such buzzwords these days that you see them everywhere and anywhere and in different ways. So for SAIT, I can say we define diversity as the unique experiences, perspectives, and identities that you have as a human being, as a person. Now, these things are both visible and invisible. We can appreciate that people are multidimensional, and we usually can't tell everything about them just by looking at them. So these are things like your race, your gender, your class, your sexual orientation, but it's also about diversity of thought. It's your point of view. You might be neurodiverse. What are your research interests? How do you problem solve? All of these things and more. Now, inclusion is something, it's an action. This is where you make a culture where everyone feels welcome, respected, and that they belong. Now, this is an intentional thing that you have to do and continuously improve at. It's not a destination, it is a journey. Just because you put a group of diverse people in a room does not mean they will feel those three things. It has to be intentionable and it has to be specific and actionable. Now, equity is a tricky one. Often folks confuse equity and equality. So equity is ensuring everyone has a fair chance to access, participate, and be successful. Equity acknowledges that there are barriers that exist in our society based on history, culture, and other things, and that it actively works to remove those barriers to make sure everyone has the fair treatment that they're looking for. Equality is when you treat everyone the same. That might seem like the right thing to do at first, but if we treat everyone the same and we have barriers, those barriers are perpetuated and reinscribed, usually without us even knowing it. So equity is really what we want to search for. Okay, so given those things, let's have a conversation, shall we? All right, so I'm going to start. I want to start with Shahzia, and then we'll go over to Matt. So Shahzia, can you tell us, I mean, in your industry of HR, are you seeing businesses and corporations embrace the values of equity, diversity, and inclusion? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think 2020 was a year that put a lot of significant focus on the need to actually have a real strategy and intentional effort behind some of this type of work. And I always say that the situations and the events that happen in the US, we're not immune to those here in Canada. And those conversations are also happening here. And it really brought to light the need to really start to embrace this idea of allowing people to have that authenticity when they come to work. Like you said, John, to be able to create spaces where people really, truly feel like they can be themselves and where they feel like they truly belong. And, you know, working for ATB for a number of years, the language of all of that was a part of our everyday conversations. And it's interesting to see the evolution of working for a company like ATB that was so far along in their journey around the embracing of equity, diversity, and inclusion, going into Fortis, Alberta, where we are really starting to build a bit of a foundation. And we recognize how much of an importance it is, not only from a talent attraction and engagement perspective, but just from the right thing to do perspective around ensuring that people feel like they're welcome, like they have an ability to contribute, and that they're really seen for who they actually really are. And so I've seen a lot of effort, intentional effort, and the desire to do things in a very thoughtful way, which I think is super important. Because as you noted, it's a journey. It's not something that you can just flip on a switch and suddenly everything feels like it's fixed. There are a number of pieces around the actual life cycle of an employee, from the moment that they might be attracted or drawn to your organization to, you know, when they're going through milestones of work anniversaries and different promotions and opportunities. There are so many touch points that an employee goes through that a strategy needs to think holistically about all of that. And it needs to be baked into corporate strategy. And I'm seeing a lot of that intentional conversation happening. And, you know, really 2020 just fast forwarded a lot of that. And I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of racialized people and those that are in minority groups where it's really, really appreciated, and trying to move it past performative is probably the next step. And like you said, the implementation is the hardest part. So.
Definitely, yeah, well said. So Matt, we'll pose the same kind of question to you, but more in a community context. I mean, you know, in these skateboard spaces that you're inhabiting, do you see EDI coming to the forefront, especially
Yeah,
for disabilities?
yeah, especially the inclusion aspect through concepts like accessibility and adaptation. And I guess I just want to use a story from this past year from, I guess, just my own life as to how inclusive skateboarding in Calgary has been. One of my students, a particularly driven young man who loves emailing people and writing for grant money, he came to me with a bunch of grant money and wanted to do skate park accessibility. And as soon as I started making industry calls, uh, loads of really important people just jumped in right away. So like Compound Skate Park donated thousands of dollars worth of facility rental right away to our cause. 9 Times Skate Shop sponsored right away and got us hooked up with Adidas, and Adidas started sending us stuff. What else? There's a ton of stuff. Oh, New Line Skate Park started consulting. So there's just all these really huge industry folks who just jumped on right away, knowing that we were going to work to rework the skate park environment and just try to think about it differently than the regular users. And they really empowered us and enabled us to do what we did as much as we did, and it put us on this huge trajectory to where we are today. So yeah, and originally I started skate bats through a friend of mine, Jason Duick. He knew that I was struggling to find a job as a low vision person. It was like not going too well through like the channels that I had. So he actually offered me a job to just try to start a low vision skateboard club for kids, knowing that I was good working with kids, that I was good with sharing the joy of skateboarding. And he bent over backwards to to make his not-for-profit skate life super inclusive to me. I mean, he went through the considerable hassle of registering for adaptive equipment for me to be able to work in an office, and he made sure I had transportation to and from events and work stuff, and even like personal stuff like being my sighted guide to meetings or industry like parties or whatever, anywhere where like handshakes or body language can like really haunt someone with sight loss. He really enabled me to make skate bats happen, and then skate bats is what enabled my kids, particularly my one student, to create this small skate park accessibility project. And then the community as a whole here in Calgary jumped on board right away and made things so easy for us to get this project done. So inclusive, in terms of inclusivity here in skateboarding in Calgary, I'm super proud of everyone. Yeah, I guess that sums up how like the community here responded to the idea of blind kids skateboarding.
That's amazing. I mean, that's quite a warm response. Adidas is a big name brand, so to have that support, wow.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's drill down a little more specific. So Shahzia, I'm going to come back to you. So we've got a question from a grad here, and this is something I'm wondering as well. So how can a company recruit more diverse candidates, and how do you know they're genuine in their efforts? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's something I think a lot of organizations struggle with, because recruiting a lot of the times is really based on relationships and networks and who you know. And oftentimes what I've seen in my career is leaders have a tendency to kind of stay in their comfort zone and kind of hire in their own likeness, and their circles of influence and who they kind of surround themselves with, whether at work and outside, typically is a reflection of their own, comfort in terms of who they have in their social circles. And do their kids go to hockey together? Are they going to school together? All of these things. And that's how it's typically built when it's not done with intention. And so a lot of the times it is about trying to sort of get in front of a number of different sort of subsets of the population, different groups. And one of the things that I've always loved to use as an HR professional when I was focusing in recruitment is really finding reciprocal ways to give back to different communities, so that you are able to build a bit of an impression around your organization from a talent branding perspective, but also being able to give back to people in a way that even if they don't end up, being hired or taking on a position with your organization, they walk away a little bit more empowered. So what I mean by that is hosting different experiences and events around resume building, digital interviewing skills, different things that you know that candidates are generally challenged with when it comes to the job searching process, because unfortunately, as much as we try to make it as inclusive as possible, oftentimes the processes can be quite dehumanizing and difficult because you are trying to focus on the efficiency factor, and it's difficult to focus on the human experience when it comes to balancing those things out from a recruitment lens. But doing workshops that are really related around empowering job seekers with advice and insight and providing them the opportunity to have face-to-face conversations and connections is one of the most impactful things that I've seen done over and over again in my career. And one of the things that I did at ATB when I was recruiting for them for their small business group was we experimented with one of our groups where we actually completely got rid of our job postings, because what we were finding is that people would apply just based on a job title, but not really understand the depth and the insight of what the role was really like. And there was that limited ability for everyone to get to know each other in a meaningful way. And what we did is we took things offline and we would host networking events at our campus location, just to have face-to-face, to be able to have people actually get insight on what those jobs were really like. Because what you read in a job description is often very different than the reality once you get into the role. And that was a great way to bridge that gap and to really build relationships and open it up to a number of different communities of people that you normally may not have had access to if you followed the traditional process of just posting and praying that the right person would apply, or tapping into your traditional networks. So
Right. I like that. Post and pray. Not the best methodology, right? Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, we often see, folks hire for culture fit as opposed to culture add. I mean, if you're only choosing folks who fit into how your culture already is, more often than not, you're choosing same because it's familiar and convenient, right? Whereas if you look for what can this person add to my organization, usually that's when you're in the growth space. So yeah, that's great. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so Matt, we've got another one for you from a student here. So they're wondering, I mean, you named a lot of great successes in the previous question. Which one of those things are you most proud of, and why?
I think accomplishing a grant-funded project where we, I guess I didn't mention it, but like the work that we did all led to a showcase event, where we adorned a skate park, the compound indoor skate park in Ramsey, in a bunch of accessibility techniques that we developed over the course of a few months. And so that what I'm most proud of is the kids I teach how to skate, how much input they gave to what they need from a skate park environment to feel included, to feel like they belong there. And then like when we decked the skate park out in like high contrast neon colored duct tape, and there's LED lights and sound beacons and all these adaptive techniques. It was like a snapshot of what a skate park can look like in the future to be inclusive for different groups. And truthfully, like our goal with Alt-Route is to use skateboarding as a way to bridge, or as a way to like prove ourselves. Like skateboarding is a small community, relatively speaking, so we can prove ourselves there. If we can prove ourselves there, we would like to move on to other sporting venues or facilities or different activities that are free-form and creative that low vision people don't necessarily have access to normally, and other disability groups, lots of lived disability.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, isn't that so forward thinking and trailblazing, right? I mean, become comfortable in one space and move on from there. That's great.
Am I frozen still?
I think John
no,
is
I'm
frozen.
totally frozen. Oh, we're all frozen.
Are we back?
Am I still frozen? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, I think.
Oh, there we go. Like, wait a minute, what did I touch? Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah.
Did I finish my thoughts?
Yeah, let's just make sure we've got our audience with us. Are we okay, Lynn, on the line?
We are, yep. It looks like we still have everybody with us.
Okay, whew, just making sure. Yeah, Matt, please finish your thought.
What did you hear last? I'm lost.
You were saying that, the kids you're working with, they're having success in skateboarding and it's encouraging them to try other sports despite some of the challenges they might face.
Yeah, like I think the mission with Alt Route, not necessarily skate bats, but the student project Alt Route is to branch out into different activities that we don't necessarily have access to. Like my dream is to go rock climbing on an accessible rock climbing wall, and I don't know where in the world people are doing that, if any at all. But I mean, that would be a cool, fun grant project. So if we prove ourselves in skateboarding, I would love to be able to branch out and seek out inclusive adaptation in like a bunch of different creative freeform movement based joy giving activities. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many of those kinds of setups in the city, not to mention hiking, of course, in the real
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Okay, so Shahzia, we want to ask you more about your podcast. So can you tell us about the color gap and maybe tell us, how are some of the ways it's making an impact that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally it started off with a partner of mine, Susie Ko. The two of us worked together at ATB for a number of years. And it really was incepted through my experiences going into leadership within HR. ATB was about close to 6,000 team members and our HR team was about 100. And we just didn't really have a lot of diversity representation of racialized women or anything really diverse in our HR leadership. And it was this realization looking back at my career and for Susie as well, where we recognized we just never had representation in leadership of anyone that really looked like us throughout our entire tenures of our HR careers. And so originally it started off as a platform to kind of highlight through storytelling the lived experiences of women of color as we were navigating through the uniqueness of having to do that when you don't necessarily see yourself represented and when you don't have those roadmaps or opportunities to really know what success looks like in your terms and how to really bring your authentic self to work and navigate through those experiences. And as of recently, Susie has stepped off the podcast to focus on family while she's homeschooling her kids during the pandemic, and it's been a lot for her to kind of juggle. And so I'm taking the podcast now to really focus around career strategy for women of color. So really just providing perspective from my own, like I said, mistakes and missteps that I've made in my career, and really to be of service, to be able to add value, to help other women of color navigate through their various elements of their career. And it's not particularly traditional in terms of where I intend to take it. The first release that I did in the new focus was really around spirituality in your job search process, which feels a little hippy dippy in some way, but it's very aligned to my heart and where I think that people need in terms of a foundation to be able to find work that feels really fulfilling for them. And, I tend to talk about things that might be a little bit unconventional around things like boundaries and saying no, and how do you sort of teach yourself how to do that as a woman of color when you are taught culturally a lot of the times to kind of just take what you receive and be appreciative and just work really hard and put your head down. How do you navigate through the personal branding process as well, and different things like negotiation, and also experiences like being children of immigrants and first generation Canadian, and having to balance the experiences of living with your family, and when you go home to see your parents you have to kind of be one person and then you're a different person when you are out in the rest of the world, and all the different identities that we have to wear and use. And so from an impact perspective, it's just been amazing to kind of hear the conversations that have come from it, and the ability for those other people to relate and to feel like you're not alone in the experience of navigating through these things. Susie and I think it was last year, we did a Disrupt HR talk on HR having a diversity problem, where a lot of times in HR departments, we see conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but not necessarily walking the walk. And so we kind of did a bit of a calling out the HR community to do better in regards to, really demonstrating the commitment around that work. And it's just opened up so many incredible conversations and aha moments for us. For myself, I'm just really excited as well to see where the new direction is going to go around being able to, like I said, be of service and give back in a meaningful way to help empower other women of color to take up all of the space that they desire to take up in the world. So
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, however they happen, it's an avenue to build relationships. Yeah. Yeah, and have conversations. I mean, I'm not a large podcast subscriber, but you convinced me. I'll sign up.
Thank you.
Love it. Okay, Matt, so I've got a question for you here. This one is just taking a little bit of a step back. So we have, of course, a lot of alumni on the call. This is our focus audience for today's session. So why should alumni care about diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and why might it be important for their careers and their career trajectory?
Oh, to me, the story of my life over the past few years has shown me that inclusion, I guess I'm just going to speak on the inclusion side. That's my specialty. But the inclusion, through accessibility and adaptation and the adjustment that people make to be inclusive, that pays forward huge. And with my boss Jason Duick making Skate Life inclusive to me, that empowered me to make skateboarding inclusive to low vision kids here in Calgary, which enables them to unlock skateboarding for themselves, whatever that might look like. And for my one kid, that looks like grant money and projects and making the compound more inclusive to low vision kids. So it's all just paying forward and opening all these doors that I never thought I didn't even know these doors were here. And so what inclusion in my life looks like is it's work that people have done to enable a person or a group of people to get beyond a perceived limitation and create for new life and new stuff, new good stuff that no one else was even thinking about. I just finished a seminar last week with Skateistan, is an organization that does lots of social positive change on skateboards all over the world. And we had our accessibility skate park seminar with them, and just all the people who want to be a part of the skate park environment, wheelchair users, like I said earlier, loss of limb. I guess I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but all the inclusion that people invest, it just pays forward and opens doors for people for way more stuff than we could ever think about without our disabilities. It took me to lose my vision to think about low vision skateboarding, and now I'm working with these kids I never would have thought.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, look at all the great things you're doing, right? You become an agent yourself. That's great.
Yeah, lots more to come too. Holy. So
yeah, we'll hear about that in a second. So Shahzia, you've said a lot of great takeaways based on especially, recruitment, but, why should alumni care? What's one thing they should really consider when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
I always go back to this thought around whether you're a leader, you have that kind of influence in your organization, or you are someone that just goes to work every single day and wants to contribute to the best of your ability. I just imagine what is possible when everyone feels like they have the ability to fully contribute, and there's an alignment to the things that they're really good at, and they're given the capacity and the space and the ability to do that. And I think from a business perspective, there's such an immediate impact on contribution and moving your business forward. It's expected these days. It's expected that there is diversity and representation, and in order to really be able to attract really great talent, people want to see themselves represented in the organizations. They want to see themselves represented in leadership, and they want to be able to think that it's possible to be able to reach for the stars and not just be secluded to certain types of industries or types of roles. And I just think it's from an altruistic perspective, imagine the possibilities of everyone being able to contribute to their full capacity and what that would do to change the conversation in a really meaningful way with respect to that sense of belonging and how many things it would solve in the world. I mean, I could go on a tangent about sort of the altruistic perspective of it, but I really think from a business perspective, it just allows everyone to be able to contribute in the most meaningful way. And it just creates an environment where people are actually happy to go to work and excited about what they're able to do. And imagine you surround yourself by coworkers who have a pep in their step every day because they're excited to be able to come to work and contribute in whatever way that they can fully.
Definitely. I mean, what you just said, Matt's a living example of all those things, right? The ability, the capacity to open up opportunity is great. And I mean, you're so right. The business imperative is undeniable. It is well documented in the literature that diverse teams are more productive, they are more profitable, they have better levels of innovation, all these kinds of things. And that's something I really try and stress for our SAIT students while they're with us and, moving into the alumni space. I mean, the sooner you are exposed to this way of thinking, this point of view, the more second nature it becomes. And if we can train you before you start working in your job, it'll be an even more seamless transition, because if you're at a company that's in this city, you'll likely be exposed. So the further along on your journey, the better. That's how I see it anyway. Okay, so we're gonna do one final question, and then we'll go back to Madeline and see if we've got some action in the chat. So Matt, you alluded to lots of great things on the horizon for the work you're doing. So tell us more about what's coming up for your group.
Okay, so we have small projects going. Like we have a few celebrity type people, not celebrity, just media friendly people with vision loss who have reached out to us and want to learn how to skateboard. So this is radio hosts, or I like this one, Lowell and Julie Taylor. They were Canadian Amazing Race contestants. Lowell has the same eye condition I do. So we have like a bunch of weird little projects like this, where we are going to be teaching a ton of low vision people how to skateboard, kind of in a way that communicates to the world how I skateboard, how my kids skateboard. But then on a greater scale, we're in open conversation right now with Skateboard Canada. That would be the organizing body over, say, a Paralympic skateboarding team, which is like crazy to me to think about one or a few of my kids making a career for themselves on a skateboard, despite having 10% or 2% vision, because of something like the Paralympics. So we're on the forefront. We're like right on the leading edge of what it means to be a Paralympic skateboarder here, both here in Canada and the States. And then we're talking to a city council member, Zev. I forget his last name, or I can't pronounce his last name. I'm so sorry. But he's a city council member. He was the former head of CASE, that's the Calgary Association of Skateboard Enthusiasts. And he's talking about our next skateboard accessibility project, which might be in the public sphere. So like going from laying out neon green duct tape on skateboard ramps to potentially permanent facility and really big grandeur showcases of changing skate park and public space to be inclusive. It's just we have so much momentum, let alone all the podcasts we've been on, media stuff that, interviews. Yeah, so lots of, and then I'm just going to be continuing skate pads in the summer and helping these kids develop their skills so that they can reach whatever potential they want or whatever potential there is for them and make skateboarding their own, whatever that looks like, with the help of like Academy Skateboard Collective here in Calgary and Market Collective. They have ramps and all that stuff that I'm going to use. So big stuff being Paralympics potentially, and public space. Who knows?
Yeah, we can tell you're excited.
Yeah, I'm like buzzing. Yeah, I get really stoked. Yeah,
I like it. So, I mean, Matt, if someone wants to get involved, what's the best way that they can, get connected with what you're doing?
I think if you just message me, like if you just go to skatebats.ca, I have an email, Instagram. There's ways of messaging me, and then whatever capacity you want to get in. If you're someone with low vision and want to think about approaching skateboarding, I mean, it's a pretty daunting task. Skateboarding is hard as it is, and let alone not being able to see it or see where you are around you. Or if you want to volunteer, or like we're just starting this journey. So like I have amazing volunteers. Like I have a videographer, and we have an art director, a low vision art director and marketing assistant now, or volunteer. So we're like, there's really important people who are plugging in and really helping us out to build this up. So like I was joking with Madeline, I want to snag like some alum engineer from this event to begin to start thinking about like permanent accessibility and like wheelchair accessibility, all the accessibility features that require large infrastructure changes and stuff like that. So yeah, just skatebats.ca.
There's a call to action, folks. It'll be like your second capstone if you're a diploma grad. And Madeline will definitely make sure we get Matt's contacts for those folks who are interested. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the follow-up. Okay, so Shahzia, same to you. I mean, tell us what's on the horizon for the work you're doing, and if people want to get involved, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, just going deeper into conversations around career strategy, and it is obviously targeted at women of color, but I think a lot of the advice is open to anyone that's kind of willing to listen to me kind of talk on the topic. We're moving towards a little bit more sort of short and sweet episodes, about 15 to 20 minutes long, so perfect for a little dog walk around your neighborhood. Pop in your headphones and take a walk and sort of listen in on some of that perspective and that advice, and a lot of also introduction of experts and those that are in the Black, Indigenous, and people of color kind of community as well, that are doing really great work in the career strategy space. There's so many amazing creators out there that are really adding a ton of value, and I'm excited to be able to try to incorporate some of their stories and their experiences into the conversations as well moving forward. And you can connect with me. I'm really active on LinkedIn. If you can learn how to spell my name, which is often quite difficult. I'm the only one on there with that same name, so it's quite easy to find me. And you can also follow us. We've got a LinkedIn page as well for the Color Gap, and I always make sure everyone is aware that it's color spelt the Canadian way, so with the U as well. And so it's just the Color Gap podcast on LinkedIn, and then at the Color Gap on Instagram, and I believe on Twitter as well. So we're always accessible through any of those platforms, and then always welcome to reach out to me at thecolorgap@gmail.com as well.
Perfect. Yeah, so start following and go from there. Makes it easy, right? Great. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time, folks. So Madeline, do you want to join us on the panel here? I'm not sure if we've got some audience questions to work through.
I have a question personally for Shahzia, and I want to know, of the podcast episodes that you've put out, which one has been maybe the most interesting to produce, or the one that you've gotten most interesting reaction from? I've listened to several of them, and I feel like I take away something every time I listen to what you have to say. So I'd love to know that from you.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the ones that we did last season was on sort of the immigrant experience, and sort of like a lot of times what we find, especially working in HR, is that oftentimes new Canadians are given a lot of very antiquated advice around how to actually land a job and thrive in the Canadian workplace. Oftentimes it is about conforming, and it's about hiding things about yourself that make you really unique. And we wanted to really highlight how much there is to celebrate about the idea of immigration, and the fact that whether you picked up and moved your life to another country on your own accord, or you had to do it because you were forced due to war or other sort of circumstances, that takes so much courage and a lot of tenacity and resourcefulness to be able to do that. Learning a new language, all of these things should really be celebrated. And we wanted to try to change a little bit of the narrative around what people are provided in terms of advice and perspective around how to show up as your authentic self, even through the recruitment process. Because I know for myself, having spent a number of years as a recruiter, I loved to see when someone did something a little different and they showcased their authenticity, who they really were, and why it was connected to the organization that I was supporting at that time. And that helped so much to help stand out amongst the volume of resumes that we would often see. And at ATB, we played around with a lot of different opportunities and experiences in allowing people to show up in their most authentic way through the recruitment process. And it was always amazing to see what would happen when you allow people to step outside the box of a traditional resume and open up the opportunity for them to showcase some of the things that make them really unique, and that should be celebrated. And I'm pretty proud of that episode, because it was just changing the conversation a little bit around some of the advice that's been provided over the years to new Canadians, and trying to recognize for themselves that there's a lot of value and worth in being different and being able to highlight that.
I feel like we should share that with our international students, right? So our students that come to see their countries, and what that means when they start their careers here, potentially.
For sure.
Okay, thank you. The one thing I wanted to touch on, we got a comment that said, I love what Matt said about not even knowing the doors were there that needed to be open, and now he's opening the doors. That is such a great comment. I just wanted to reiterate that, because I think that's so important to realize that sometimes we're not in a position to even know that those doors are closed, and to be able to have the opportunity to open them. The other thing Matt said to me when I had a conversation with him prior to this that I wanted to share with everybody on the call, because I felt it was really poignant, was how he's working with kids that feel marginalized by their own bodies to create confidence. And I thought how often we don't think about how we almost marginalize ourselves, right? Or we're in a position that we don't even realize it. So some of the things that you've both said today about breaking out of those things and how we can celebrate them, I think is just wonderful. So I want to thank you both. The last question I would like to ask of all three of you on this panel is, for alumni, for students, for staff, anybody on this webinar, if you're looking to learn more about equity, diversity, and inclusion as it relates, where can people go? Where's the next place that you advise people to look to learn more and get more involved?
Sure. Should I start us off, or? Yeah. Well, can I do some shameless self-promotion?
Please.
Is that okay? But please check out Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at SAIT.ca. You can find the strategy there. You can find the training and other resources that we've been working on. There are recordings of webinars that we've done in the past. The most recent one, which will be added, which I think is very cool, as one of the ways we are celebrating and commemorating Black History Month at SAIT, which is in February. We screened the documentary about John Ware, who was one of the pioneering Black cowboys in Southern Alberta in the 1880s. He's also the namesake for the Hospitality and Tourism building on campus. So we screened his biography, and then we hosted a discussion forum about John as an individual and as a person, but also about his experiences of racism, how that relates to, current initiatives and movements of the contemporary moment, Black Lives Matter, et cetera. So that will be up there, and that was a really great conversation. So that's where I would suggest you turn.
That's awesome. And the link to the LinkedIn Learning path's on there as well, right, John?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So there are 8 LinkedIn Learning paths, which we curated in the past month. So if you're interested in a particular topic, you can do some asynchronous learning on your own for free.
Yeah, so if folks don't have access to LinkedIn Learning, a great resource is the public libraries throughout Alberta. So I know the rural libraries as well as the Calgary Library, you can get access to LinkedIn Learning. So if you're an alum that's looking to take part in those LinkedIn Learning paths, please check that out. Shahzia.
Yeah, I always provide a little bit of an unconventional perspective on this because it's worked so well for me. I think there's so much power in storytelling. I was so captivated by Matt's experiences and have learned so much just through his own lived experience that I think that's usually where I always recommend people start. And I think that comes in so many forms, whether it's sort of curating a different feed on who you follow on Instagram by trying to get different curators or creators that might be of different backgrounds than you, differently abled, different races, different genders, sexual orientations, all of those perspectives add such value and richness to your life without you really even having to try super hard to kind of get that fed to you. I also follow such a really unique variety of people on YouTube and sort of watch a lot of vlogs and their day-to-day experiences of navigating the world from their lens, and it adds such richness to my perspective. And I think books as well around reading from lived experiences. I love the sort of plug around the John Ware documentary because that in itself is also such richness in education and storytelling. And there's just such a variety of interesting books that not only highlight, the actual strategies and work around this space, but also just people's biographies and their lives and how they navigated from point A to B and kind of worked through things that required them to tap into some courage and resilience. And I have a suggestion list that I can also send to you as well. I've got a pretty long list of really great books that have added a ton of insight from my own journey as well.
You can share that with everybody on the call if you're willing. That would be awesome. Thanks. Matt.
For me, I'm going to do a shameless plug too, if that's okay. If John did it, I guess I can do it. But for me, it's AMI, that's Accessible Media Incorporated. They're actually doing a 1 hour length documentary on me and my kids' process to make skate parks more accessible, which should be coming out this fall, so AMI is, I guess, the company, and they're producing the documentary, and they're going to be covering the past skate park accessibility showcase project we did back in November, and then whatever else happens, all the big stuff that might happen this summer when we can skateboard outside again. So that's a huge resource to figure out my process. But AMI also produces documentaries about like Paralympic snowboarding or low vision hockey, or whatever disabled people are doing to like better their lives and the lives of those who live with the same issues. And then also podcasts, like we were just on a podcast, it's called Eyes Free Sports by Greg Lundberg. If you just type in Eyes Free Sports on Google, you might find him on Podcast Bean. And he interviews, like we were on episode 29, so there were 28 episodes before us of people with sight loss who are doing just crazy things, and people who have been unable to do crazy things through accessibility, like backcountry insanely steep snowboarding or skiing with like a guide, stuff like that. So those are my two main things. Oh, and maybe also follow Dan Mancina on Instagram. He's like the main blind pro skateboarder down in the States, and he'll show you like his process of like adapting his house. He's creating his own program for kids down there with like a skate park that's being built by New Line skate parks right next to his own house. So keep pushing his initiative to like continue to adapt skateboarding down in States. So yeah, like Dan Mancina, AMI, and the Eyes Free Sports podcast, just as a start, and then you'll find your way from there. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I love the comment on storytelling and being able to find people's stories, because funnily enough, I found out about both of you through podcasts. That's how I found out you both existed. And then I found out you were both alum, and that's why I reached out. So it really goes to show that when we share our stories and when we get out there, we're able to open all sorts of doors by just sharing who we are and what we're doing in the world. This has been a really fun conversation, and I want to thank you, all three of you, and all of you who are joining us for logging on tonight. To the alumni, to staff, students who joined us, again, thank you. If you have any further questions for any of us on the call here, please reach out to me at alumni@sait.ca, and I'll direct them any way that they need to go. We will have another What Works event next month, so please stay tuned. We'll be letting everybody know about the date and the subject matter for that one. But with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight for such a wonderful conversation. And we'll be sending a follow-up email and sharing some resources with all of you to move forward. And I know that I look forward to following the Color Gap podcast and to seeing this documentary come out and following both of your careers and what you're doing, because I think you are both doing really incredible work. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.